and I'm thrilled to have as my guest today for this interview, Dr. William Guillory, PhD. Welcome, Bill.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
And
Um,
Bill, where are you today? Where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking from my home office, as a matter of fact. Nice, friendly surroundings, and it sort of cradles me, makes me feel good.
Good. Well, just by way of introduction, Dr. Guillory has facilitated seminars for over 300 organizations, and it's quite a list, including Microsoft, Toyota Financial Services, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Dow Chemical. I could go on for quite a while. Your presentation at our conference in March, it just sounds fascinating. The title is Higher Order Creativity, Quantum Thinking, and Consciousness Exploration. And I just want to read the first sentence from your description. The central intention of this presentation is to provide the opportunity for participants to experience expanded states of consciousness. It's quite an invitation, Bill. So let's start there. How are you going to do that? How are you going to actually help us all have an expanded state of consciousness experience?
Well, I think the most powerful response to that question is I have two major exercises planned, and one what I call a warm-up exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, is very, very participative by the audience. I basically believe that people learn best by doing. And
Mm-hmm.
then to introduce some concepts, if I can engage them, that sort of puts their mind into, what are you saying? Are you really serious? I understand your words, but creativity occurs outside of the mind and
Mm-hmm.
certainly outside of the brain. Of
Mm-hmm.
course it does. Well, where does it come from? And so that's how I plan to engage people, through stimulating conversations that challenge the box they live in.
So let's just return to the description of an expanded state of consciousness, and say more about that. I think all of us have touched into it at times
Yeah.
for one reason or another, and say more about the actual experience. So it's outside the mind; it's not limited. Say more.
Yeah. So if we presume that my personal consciousness, which is synonymous with my mind, is finite, and I'm going to make it spherical as a form or a shape, and then I take that spherical form and I take a slice out of it and I lay it down. It looks like a tree trunk, that you've
Mm-hmm.
cut,
Yeah,
and you
with the
see
rings.
rings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And each one of those rings represents an expansion in terms of a person's growth. They're learning everything, your whole reality is within that ring. And as you go through life experiencing more and more, the major contribution to that ring is expanded wisdom.
Mm.
And so if you could do that volitionally, not
Mm-hmm.
by accident,
Mm.
running into cars and fences and brick walls all the time.
Right.
Just personal growth is going to be a way of life for me. And
Well,
go ahead.
what I'm loving in what you're saying is the whole idea of access. It seems that it's accessing something that already resides within us, correct?
Yes. Yeah. The major thing to realize is that the whole world is outside of that ring of consciousness that you have.
Mm.
Everything outside of that is you don't know. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, you don't know you don't know
Mm. Yeah,
until some
right,
experience comes
right.
into your life and sort of interacts with what's already in there, already consistent.
Uh-huh.
And from its own perspective, it assumes it's perfect. Now you drop a pebble and waves start to begin. And those waves have to be taken care of. They can't be simply ejected. Those
Mm-hmm.
statements I made to you at the start. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to find some way to include them, to change the way you are, and that's the expansion process,
Mm-hmm.
or to make it consistent. But it's like saying, if you go to New York, go back home, you can never go home again.
Well, right, and it reminds me of another descriptor in for your keynote, which is Microsoft's slogan from 1994, "Where do you want to go today?" Right? So that's about direction and navigation.
Yeah, well, there are two steps in the process. One is to recognize that, to the extent we feel limited and entrapped, is of our own making. And so
Mm.
the first question is, how do I get out?
Mm-hmm.
Because out is where new learning is. Out is where new experiences are. Out is where expanded wisdom is. And I need to encounter something to be able to have that kind of experience or that
Mhm.
opportunity.
Mhm.
And if I can't just reject it, it has to fit within my system, which means my system has to increase to
Mhm.
include it in some
Mhm.
sensible way, because I can't live my life in a confused state.
Mhm.
And
That's the expansion you're speaking of, right?
yes, and that's usually personal transformation. For an
Mhm.
example, if I take my daughter, when she just finished college, so the same thing she did at 6 years old, she does now. She comes with her suitcase and she lays it on the floor. The storage cabinets have no use, and then she spreads her stuff out. And there's two opportunities here, real, and that's what I call a holistic realization.
Uh-huh.
One is that I gain the insight. Well, what's the problem with her, habitating on the floor like that?
Uh-huh.
And the second is, if I'm really, really perceptive, she's going to do exactly what she wants to do in life,
Yeah.
regardless of what I say and do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can probably influence her most by
Mhm.
working on my relationship with her, not work on brainwashing her.
Mhm.
And
Well, I'd like to go to something you say in your keynote description, because to me this is extremely compelling. You ask participants to bring a recent dream or an exploration to the conference
yeah,
so that they're able to learn through a team exercise how to recover the answer to a sleep state request. Now
yeah.
that there's a lot in there, Bill, and I'd like you to unbundle it if you would, including just what is a sleep state request.
Well, I assume that the mind is the software of the brain,
Mhm.
and that there's a component of the mind that actually is working to try to make that mind move from a survival way of thinking to a compatible way of thinking.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I have conversations with that part of the mind. Now it's a model. Now, whether it works or not, is the most important thing to me, not to try and prove that this is true,
Mhm.
or I can
Mhm.
do experiments to prove it. I'm not interested in that.
Mhm.
We're dealing in a realm where people have the courage to explore beyond their present limitations,
Mhm.
and they can create any model they choose. They
Mhm.
can create any kind of entity they want. And
Mhm.
the important thing is something downloaded the next
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get a
Yeah.
solution from it,
Right.
and it served its purpose.
Uh-huh.
And if you come along with a better model for me and say, hey, why don't you try this, Bill? I will be happy to try. In other
That's
words, I'm not going to make the model holy,
yeah.
but what happens as a result of it.
Yeah, that's so refreshing, Bill, because you're a world-class expert. You've served so many big organizations. You have so much you bring, and yet you're leading with humility and openness to learn. And just that is such an inspiration for all of us who are interested in creativity.
Well, I think that is, for me personally, is to be able to spend time with the speakers and people like you. And what I'm always astounded by, even now, is how much people call participants know.
Yeah.
That's why I try very hard to pull out of them what's, I think, latent there,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't thought about.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't thought about giving themselves permission to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we wait too much on the Cartesian
Yeah.
Newtonian paradigm
Yeah.
to give us permission to try things that are always there. For an example, the most common thing that's readily available to us are the five metaphysical skills corresponding to the five physical skills, human skills. For an example, clairvoyance, telepathy, clairseverance, all of those things. And I asked myself, suppose I found a way to connect the five physical senses with the five metaphysical senses. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a smooth transition between one and the other. I wonder how that would change me as a person. For an example, deception is only possible at the human level.
Mm-hmm.
Deception is not possible at the metaphysical levels.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of way would I interact with people in the world? And how honest could I be with myself?
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, I don't want to lose the little thread there on my question about the sleep state request,
Yeah,
because that's a provocative phrase, and I really don't know what it means, and I expect some of our viewers won't
thank
as
you for
well. So
bringing me back.
could you explain that?
Yeah, I make a sleep state request every night. In
Mhm.
other words, if I don't make a request of what I want my mind to work on as a resolution, it will self-select for me. So you can approach this thing in two ways, one in a directed way or one in a spontaneous way. If it chooses, it will choose what is the most important thing going on in your life right now that's not resolved or you're having difficulty with,
Ah,
and it'll work on it for you
yeah.
so you can be functional next morning.
While
But
you're sleeping.
yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, your body is just recovery. Your
Mhm.
mind is free to do anything it wants.
Well, give us an example of a sleep state request that you might make.
Oh, one of the most recent ones. Um, all the way since I started channeling in 1985, I use it almost regularly. And one of the things in my work is to come up with new learning experiences, sometimes called modules in trainings or something like that.
Mm.
And if I'm trying to come up with a new idea, a new concept of how to have people learn something, the whole thing comes holistically in one sleep state. However, my mind isn't smart enough to be able to deconvolute it to the linear
Mhm.
form we think in. So
Mhm.
I may have to make the same request for about 1 week before
Mm.
the pieces all fit together.
Mhm.
But every time I sit down to write a book, that's the way I do it.
Mhm.
And I've written a series of 4 books recently called the Pleiadian series.
Mhm.
And when I start the book, honestly, well, I don't know where I'm going. I mean, I, mean, I, I have an idea of what I'm trying to do, but to say I write out an outline or a chapter, the other thing when I write a book, I start right in the middle.
Uh-huh.
I get sort of a little voice that says it's time to start.
Uh-huh.
And I pick up a pen and it takes off.
Yeah.
And when I'm done, it
Wonderful.
stops.
Wonderful.
Just like
Wonderful. Well,
so,
Bill, I want to applaud you for your honesty about your process because, you use the word channeling, which
yeah.
is kind of an outlier term, and yet you're so mainstream. And I think this is something really rare and wonderful you bring to the conference is this fusion of esoteric interest, knowledge, and experience with extreme practicality and organizational efficiency. I don't encounter that a lot. So bravo.
Well, I'm surprised that most people don't realize. I would say 90% of the population in the country channels. And it simply means I'm making a connection from
Hmm.
my more limited present self to something that expands beyond me to discover something about myself. Now,
Hmm.
this is a directed request. I would like
Hmm.
to know my passion in life.
Hmm.
Passion, for example, is not somebody who loves to write. It's
Hmm.
somebody who loves to communicate ideas. And
Hmm.
so that can be done in a myriad of ways.
Hmm.
And so to begin to recognize that I can contact what my passion is, and therefore it directs a lot of what I do unconsciously every day that I
Hmm.
have the most fun doing. For
Yeah.
example, for me, it's creativity, innovation, ideas, somebody saying, I don't believe that. Then I know I have a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that the whole idea comes from a request though. I would
Uh-huh.
like to know what my passion is.
Hmm.
And you couple that with you
Well, Bill, I'd like you to zero in on the final promise you make in your description of your keynote,
yeah.
which is to give attendees an inner space expansive experience, which
Yeah.
again is a very compelling invitation. But you also add on the term that it's directed towards a challenge in their life. I love this because we can have epiphanies. My experience is if they don't get attached to something we're doing in our lives, they can come and go. It's a peak
Yeah.
experience, it fades.
Yeah.
So say a little bit about this inner space experience and how you're going to help participants attach it to something, some challenge in their life.
I think people will surprise themselves how easy it's going to be the way I plan to facilitate it. And that is to getting to the alpha state,
Mm,
4 to 17 hertz. And something like the sleep state, which is similar. and sort of make an invitation
Mm.
using background music commonly, and giving them instructions about where they might want to go. But everything is an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And then to get out of their own mind so they can get into what I call their creative consciousness. And
Right.
once they're in there, they see the problem, and they've been brought along so gently
Mm.
that I've had people see miraculous things in
Mm.
courses before that
Mm.
turn their companies around, turn their lives around.
Wow.
But it's all based on pulling out of people what's in there that's well hidden and well insulated.
Uh,
And
uh.
it's about, it'll be about a 15 or 20-minute experience, and it will be miraculous. I can tell you that.
Well, Bill, this is so thrilling, and I just can't wait to meet you in person and to be in the room with you in Seattle. Just a reminder for our viewers, the conference is the Architects of the New Paradigm Conference on Creativity, Innovation. It's in Seattle this year, March 21st, 22nd. The website is anpconference.com. It's where you can register. And Bill, just before we sign off here, I'd love you to take a moment and just imagine that someone is watching, listening to you right now who's considering coming to the event. What would you say to them? I know you're inviting people to bring something with them. Give a personal invitation for people who may be wondering whether this is the right thing for them to do or not.
Yeah. If they've looked at the video, then the answer is they're ready. If they turned it off after 1 minute,
Right.
there might be some doubts. The second thing is that what we plan to present is a buffet.
Hmm.
We're not telling people don't be what you're not, or you feel uncomfortable doing. But if you feel a slight bit of discomfort, it means you're encountering something maybe that's valuable as an invitation. First of all, and so that it's an invitation for a buffet, and something will happen in those 2 days that will connect with you, and that's what you want to take and run with.
Hmm.
And once you pick up some of these ideas, they're all now integrated in your mind, and it
Hmm.
will continue to come back to you as you experience your life over the next 2, 3 weeks, a month. One statement will sort of, you recognize it in terms of how you live your life or somebody in your life. And
Is it fair to say, Bill, that in the period of time now, it'll be different for everyone who tunes into this video whenever they do, that between the time a person commits to come and shows up in the room is really prime time to prepare?
yes, it
Would you
is.
say that to bring something with them?
Yes. I would invite everybody to bring something that they're struggling with.
Hmm.
And I would say, bring something that's really challenging right now,
Mm-hmm.
and approach it in your own way in terms of, this is what I'm here for. You always get much more out of any kind of experience like we're talking about if you come looking for something. Then almost any presentation, any talk,
Yeah.
any experience somehow fits that question
Yeah.
that you come with, and that's how you get the greatest value from it.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. My guest today in this dialogue has been William Guillory, PhD, who's the keynote presenter for our 6th annual Architects of the New Paradigm Conference in Seattle, March 21st, 22nd. Hope to see you there. You can register on the website, anpconference.com. Thank you so much, Bill, and I'll see you in Seattle.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. See you
And all
there.
our viewers too.
You. Bye now.
Bye-bye.